Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It is the week of March 3rd. This is Season 4, Episode 5. It is the third Sunday of Lent, and it is already March. I am getting ready to move into 2 weeks of inspiration, lots of talks in various situations, various locations coming up, which I look forward to sharing. But first, Ann, I'm super curious. February had an extra day. It is leap year. Anything special that you did at school? Anything noteworthy? Or was it just one more day that got you to Friday?
Well, Haley, you do love the B holiday conversation, right? We've talked about this in past episodes, holiday, the A-listers and the B-listers. You know, I just showed a simple slide at the beginning of class with like 4 fun facts about leap day. You know, people born on this day are called, do you know?
No, I don't. I haven't heard that.
Leaplings or leapers.
Okay.
2 of the facts I honestly need to fact check. Like, one is that this day does not legally exist. I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. I need a little more context. One was that it doesn't happen it was something about like timing of leap day. But the 4th one was interesting because it was outdated or out of like students didn't totally understand it. And I remember this growing up. On leap day, women could ask men to marry them. And I thought of like Sadie Hawkins and that tradition. And I thought, you know, I don't know the origins of this. And students were kind of like, what is this? And I said, you know, it might be like a Victorian principle. That was the best I could kind of come up with it when, you know, women and men had very defined roles about who could do what. So it was kind of a fun conversation. But other than that, it was just another day in February. People have strong feelings about February. Since it's my birthday month, I love it. But a lot of people are like, let's move out of February.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think I have any strong feelings either way. We did not do anything in particular at our school or even anything noteworthy more than it was just February 29th. I did read about a woman who turned 100 years old on February 29th. So that was actually just her 25th actual birthday, which I thought was kind of fun. Yep. And I did know that there were some schools that did a leap out of bed day, and it was a pajama day at school, which I thought was cute. And then I saw a lot of little frogs running around, you know, people showing frogs everywhere, which I thought was kind of strange too for leaping, jumping. Anyway, I agree with you. I'm not even sure this is a B holiday. I think it's a C-list holiday. It's just a whole strange concept, but it I guess it's here to stay. So there we go. Leap day.
I like it. My sister is convinced she was supposed to be born on leap day. My mom was induced, and so she thinks it was a leap year when she was born, which is kind of fun. And I asked my students if they know anyone with this birthday, and they did, which was interesting. Yeah. Every class knew, and I said, did they celebrate on the 28th or the 1st? And it was 50-50.
Interesting.
So, yeah. That's all I got on there.
Yeah, I know. Not much of a hot topic at all. But
all right. Well, what's cooking? Where are you going? Anywhere interesting that you're traveling?
So there is a lot going on. No, I'm actually not necessarily traveling, but I do have several talks coming up, which is a fun, meaningful thing to do during Lent. And I think that's one of the reasons I was asked, certainly at this particular time. But one of the things I wanted to share is you can teach an old dog new tricks. So I kept thinking about this because I did something that I have wanted to do for probably at least 10 years, and I finally figured out how to do it. So 2 summers ago, when we moved out of our family home, I know we've talked about that, we downsized, the boys went to college, I found a box of over 40 VHS tapes. Which really don't exist anymore. And they are all videotapes from my time in college. So every newscast that was shown, the video footage that we took in the hospital when people would come visit, therapy videos from the time of the accident, videos from the 1-year anniversary, videos from my time in San Diego, both from South Bend, Phoenix, San Diego, and a lot of footage on my first race back. So it's a lot. 40 VHS tapes is a lot. And of course, you never know what's on there, right? And you never, maybe it's a 10-minute news segment that's on 2 hours of video and you have to scroll through and figure it out. So I sent it off to Legacy Box. I think that's the name of the company, where you can have it digitized. And so here I was really entrusting this kind of meaningful box of raw footage that I sent off to be digitized. And I got it back. And I started watching it on my laptop, and this was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And I really went down a rabbit hole. I don't live in the past. I know I talk about it a lot. I know I share my story all the time, but it's not really something that I spend a lot of time allowing to consume my emotions. I think I would barely get out of bed if I lived, in that time of my life. Yeah. But it was pretty fascinating to go back and watch newscasts that I remember, not from the time, but I remember seeing over the course of the years, and then some that I felt like I had never seen before, which I thought was really interesting.
Yes.
And then, so I downloaded all those to my computer. Then I thought, okay, I probably need to get these off my desktop and put them into a Google, the cloud, so that they're always there. And then I started planning for these few talks that I have coming up. So they're very different. One is I was asked to speak to an investment company. It's just part of their quarterly, let's bring a speaker in and have, hear a great story. So that's one. The second one, which is I've done before, but it's been a really long time, I was asked to speak at a 2-day Lenten Retreat. So fortunately, this came through Catholic Speakers Bureau, and fortunately, it's at a local parish. It's maybe 45 minutes away, so it's not too far. And it's a 2-day retreat. And they gave me the times for the 2 nights that they wanted me to speak as part of the program. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I'm sharing my story on 2 different nights. And then a couple of weeks ago, I had a phone call to just plan and confirm. And she said, now you do know you're coming for 2 days. And I said, yep, got it, no problem. And I said, and then the way she asked it just piqued my interest. And I said, okay, so am I sharing the same presentation on 2 different nights, or is this a 2-night presentation? And she said, this is a 2-night presentation. And I thought, okay, that's a really good thing that I figured that out before I showed up for that first day. So now I have this much longer scope of time that I will be sharing the same story, told in a way that is helping to facilitate this retreat at this parish, which, again, I do love to do. So then I started thinking about these videos. Now, hang with me, because it is all coming back to this. And I thought, wouldn't it be really neat to be able to embed some of these videos into my PowerPoint slides? Okay, Anne, I have never done that. I have wanted to do that. I have had people say, wow, your presentation is great. The only thing I could think would be really fun to see would be that first race, if you have any footage of it. And it is, that's kind of a fun part of the story. So sure. I, thanks to our podcast, know how to take video, upload it to iMovie, cut it down. And so I was able to take some of these videos that I had, thank goodness I had gone down this rabbit hole 3 months or 4, whatever that was, months ago, because I knew now what each of the videos were, knew what I was looking for, was able to upload them, edit them, and embed them into my PowerPoint slides. And for this 50-year-old woman, it was a huge win and an exciting kind of evening activity where I will now end kind of the first day of the presentation with the 1-year anniversary of our accident. And then there's this great 5-minute segment from ESPN that is from that 1-year anniversary that gives a really nice recap of that first year, and then talks about how, I'm hoping to compete again, and then I can go into the rest of the story. So I'm really excited now to have this 2-day time span to share the story in a meaningful way where I can really dive deep into the faith aspect of my journey, which at the investment company, I'm really not going to. But being able to talk about that really meaningful
No.
side of my story. So that's what I've been doing in my spare time, my free time,
Yeah.
kind of, on my time off. But I love it. It's a wonderful way for me to spend my time during Lent reflecting
Mhm.
and just reminding myself how far I've
Yeah.
come, and how challenging life can be, knowing that many people
Yeah.
are going through really tough times and challenges right now. And I'm really looking forward to next weekend, sharing this at the retreat.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a middle-aged dog, right? Rather than
Okay, not an
old
old dog.
dog.
Fair enough. Fair
And
enough.
I guess what prompted you to convert, like what was, if for the listener, it's like, okay, we all have these projects, but and I love how it came to have like great use, but what prompted you to even take the step to
To
put these in the digital format? Was there something, did you
so
find
so
source
two
or what?
two things. One, space. 40 VHS
Yes,
tapes is a lot bigger than
no
a
doubt.
small thumb drive. But
Yeah,
also really not wanting to lose it. And you can,
yeah,
those videos, there's some are fuzzy, that you can tell they are from 30 years ago, but I just thought I don't want to lose this. And
yeah,
once you start looking at some sort of digitizing company, you get a million ads for
yeah,
it. So I
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
waited till
Uh-huh.
I got a 50% off coupon, and I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to do it as cheaply as I
Yeah,
can.
it's
But
great.
yeah, it
Yeah,
really was just to make sure I could preserve them.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I think what's interesting to me about the story is like the way this project then found a safe landing. And I mean, a needed landing, like in another area of your life
Yes.
where this has been an ongoing, response because you've shared that your story from, different audiences over time. And I feel like anytime you give your talk, you do it in a new way or you add
Hmm.
something. So this is even that much, adding another new chapter for a 2-day retreat. Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
that's a lot of prep. So I just love how it's all come together.
I do too.
Right.
It doesn't always
Yeah.
happen, but I am looking
Yeah.
forward to it. So
Yeah.
keep me and Holy Family Parish in
Okay.
Davidsonville
Yeah.
next week in our prayers.
Yes.
But I'm looking
Well,
forward
you
to it.
got to share with them that story because there's not, an adult, a parent, anybody, a teacher who doesn't love when we clear the clutter, right? How it
True.
opens up new opportunities. So there's been a lot written about that. I think it's awesome. So,
True. It
yes.
does feel good, I will say. I still have that box of
Yeah.
VHS tapes because I'm having a hard time throwing them out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I didn't quite declutter yet, but
Yes.
it's making its
Oh.
way slowly. I want to make sure I have all the videos saved in the Google Drive first, and then
Yeah.
once I know they are there, then I can get rid of
Yeah.
them.
Well, you know what Marie Kondo would say to do, right?
Yeah. What? No. Thank
Thank them
it.
for their service,
Yes.
bow,
Yes.
thank them for their service, and put them on their merry way.
Uh,
Knowing that they live in a new way
yes,
here
in a
in digital format.
non-bulky
Yes.
space. Yep. So,
Awesome. That's
yeah.
great. Yeah.
How about
I'd
you?
love to
What's
see.
up? What's hot?
Yeah, what do we have? So, when we were in the intro, Haley, when you were talking about, it's this week, it's the third week in Lent. One of my students this week said, we're not really entirely halfway there. It's just, it's a journey. It's a long one. But it's, such a fruitful time. So I agree that like you were talking about giving a talk, and I'm giving a talk as well. At Regis Jesuit in Denver. I fly
Mhm.
there tomorrow after school. They do an event called Diversity Day. They are celebrating 20 years of girls' division. So it's Wisdom of Women is their theme, celebrating 20 years of girls' division. So I'm talking about the wisdom of women in sport and taking kind of a long look at the contributions of women in sport. It's been kind of interesting because researching for it a little bit, looking at the numbers of professional athletes that are women.
Mhm.
So the number of professional athletes of women, I read the stat and it says that 40% of professional athletes are women and they get 4% of the media coverage. And I started to think about that stat and I was like, 4 out of 10 pro athletes are female. I don't know.
Ha,
I was like,
right.
that doesn't,
That seemed a bit skewed.
right? And so I did a little more research that was on a blog. A student referenced University of Minnesota study, which said 40% of athletes, so people who participate in athletics are female, which I can
Mm-hmm.
see based on the numbers of college athletes, especially with Title IX, high school programming, like kind of the way that we can quantify it. So it's 40% of athletes are female, 60% male, again, with 4% of the total media coverage showing. So then that was from 10 years ago. So I tried to find today, and today it's like 16% of media coverage is on female athletics. I will agree with that. I think that's about right. I have noticed, that there is more coverage, whether it's Caitlin Clark with, college basketball, the WNBA. There's so many different sports, obviously, that we talked about on the show, but 16% seems about right. So
Mm-hmm.
then I just did kind of a small social experiment. I listened to Pardon the Interruption and I read this Yahoo morning brief. And I went through 4 episodes and I counted for Pardon the Interruption in a 25-minute podcast. Each one had one segment on women. So, for example, it might mean that the new leader of the Pac-2 is a woman. She was the, assistant director. She's been promoted. It's Caitlin Clark, now going for the new record,
Mm-hmm.
or Candace Parker weighing in on court storming. But it's one story
Mm-hmm.
per episode. And then looking at the Yahoo morning brief, there's little in the headlines. You'd have to be intentional about it, do it in history and on this day and what's going on this week. You would just have to kind of pop it in. But it would require a real commitment to, it should be, to say 50-50, the market is determining this. I don't know why it couldn't be 40-60 representative of that. Like that would be the goal. I'm open to any argument of 50-50
Mm-hmm.
or the 16% for the pro, because the truth is the media covers both collegiate and professional sports. So we have to go to that number 40%.
Right.
So at any rate, we're going to do a deeper dive onto women in sports for this presentation because they're not getting it in the larger media. And I'm okay with that. I'm not going into the why so much. It's a 15-minute presentation, but I've seen you shaking your head a lot as I'm sharing these stats. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just worth, I think, becoming aware of,
Right.
at least the starting point.
Well, it does a disservice, I think, to the next generation of female athletes because if all you're seeing, and let's talk about Caitlin Clark. I mean, she's amazing. She just broke a record that is as old as I am, and it's a remarkable feat. And especially, in this day of one and done in the men's program, you're never gonna, no one's ever gonna get close again. However, if that's the only thing our young female athletes are seeing, this isn't even a once in a generation talent that Caitlin Clark is. This is probably once in a century talent that we're having here. And if that's the only sort of norm and goal and expectation, it really is a disservice to all of these young girls who could aspire to be so much, but they're probably never going to be her.
Yeah.
I wish they would just see women's sports, the ups and the downs, and not just the highlights. But that's probably a whole nother podcast we could discuss
It
someday.
is. Yeah, yeah. That's our next
That's our
podcast,
next
folks.
series. That's next year's theme. But I do love that
Yeah.
you're going to. I can't wait to hear about how it goes. I've been to Regis Jesuit, so I look forward to having that
Yeah.
connection with you. But hearing how it goes, I love that wisdom of women. What a great topic.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. And it's funny because one of the things in my free time I started, have you done anything with Masterclass?
No, you've mentioned that before. I've
Okay.
seen,
I was
and
wondering if I had.
I have
Yeah.
not, and I would love to. I think it's one, such a great resource, but two, what a great way to what a great way to share in a different form so much information and expertise that people have. We all love TED Talks, But a master
Yeah.
class really gives you kind of, it's like the next level deep dive into learning from really fascinating people.
Yeah. Well, the reason I mentioned it is because Simone Biles has one, and I'm speaking about her, but hers is on the fundamentals of gymnastics, Haley. So I watched it, and I am not a gymnast.
Mm-hmm.
I was never even able to do a cartwheel. So as much as I appreciated her masterclass, I had to respectfully, you know, I guess not even take it pass fail. I had to drop the
Ha!
course.
Oh,
But
gosh.
for anyone, but there are plenty of others. So yes, check it out.
I will. I will. So, in the
Yeah.
spiritual stew this week, I wanted to talk about a gospel that we are all aware of. I think Christians, Catholics, non Catholics, I think anyone, most people have heard of the gospel that we refer to as the prodigal son. And it's interesting because I was reading it and I thought, and I actually don't think the word prodigal is in there. It might be, but I might be missing that. But I remember when I started reading it thinking, oh, this is the prodigal son. And I thought, what does prodigal even mean? We know that word, we know what it refers to. So I looked it up, and the definition that I read is spending money or resources freely and recklessly, wastefully extravagant. And I'm not sure that's what I thought it meant. So I'm glad I looked it up. I thought prodigal maybe meant wayward, runaway. I thought it actually was specifically referring to the son. And then I started thinking, and this is something that has really struck me and kind of consumed my last 24-ish hours is, maybe Luke isn't really just talking about the son. Maybe he is talking in writing this gospel about all of us and how we all can at times perhaps be lost, run off. Maybe we actually aren't physically gone, but we are spending money or our resources freely and recklessly and being wastefully extravagant. And maybe that's not just with money. Maybe that's with our gifts. Maybe that's with our time. Maybe that's with our energy. And I thought, how am I being prodigal? I don't know if that's even the correct way to use the word, but I've really thought about that. In what ways could I be referred to as prodigal, and how do I stop that? So it's something I've really been thinking about because it's, you hear, oh, the story of the prodigal son. The son goes away, comes back. He's been celebrated when the son there. We all know the story, but I don't think I have actually really thought about what does that mean and how does it apply to me, and in what ways am I wasteful and reckless
Mm.
in my life that I
Mm.
could rein in and be aware of. So just
Yeah.
kind of a little interesting, different take on
Yeah.
what that gospel is, because I do think many of us hear it and we have heard the story our whole lives. And maybe we don't listen as carefully as we might if it was a story that we hadn't heard before.
Yeah, I mean, I everything you're asking, I was like doing a personal exam, and as you were saying, are we, wasteful with this, with time? You said our talents, our gifts, all of
Mm-hmm.
it. Yes, I mean, those are great questions, truly, for a personal exam. And you're right, it is one of the great stories, and you hope that the great stories don't get lost on us because we have heard them. But if I were a non-Christian and we were looking at Christianity, this story, the Good Samaritan, Book of Job, everybody identifies them as like some of the most seminal and impactful stories because of the many truths I think that they reveal. And so your your question, like maybe that's us, I think is exactly the question to sit with, because I have found that a lot of people identify with the brother who feels wronged and
Sure.
was the good son, and well, who wants to identify with the wasteful brother, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
that's not our own humanity probably gets in the way of seeing ourselves in that and seeing ourselves in the other role. But because of those questions you asked, I think then we probably could get a little closer to what this parable is trying to reveal to us.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and you do make a good point. I do think most of us hear the story and identify with the son who stays thinking, yeah, I try to do the right thing all the time and it's,
mhm.
that's not fair. We get that. I get that point, but for some
Yeah,
reason that word prodigal, and maybe that's the Holy Spirit telling me something. But it was really
yeah.
interesting that that's what stuck with me this reading.
Well, and like again, as you were asking, I started to think like, in what ways are we wasteful?
Sure.
And, I read in America Magazine, Americans throw out about 1/3 of their food
Hmm.
because we just don't get to it in time. It goes bad. And I could think of other material possessions
Sure.
that we don't use. And that's maybe where Marie Kondo is right. Like, just pass it on, let it go. We have so much. Those are, I mean, it's a good question. In what ways, wasteful also meaning like going deeper with the wasteful thing,
Right.
like, yeah, how do you interpret that? Like, is it just not using? Is it having a surplus? Is it literally just, you know, yeah, keeping it to yourself?
Well, I think of how much time we spend on social media on our phones. That
Mm,
that is, one could argue that is wasteful time.
yes. Yeah.
But that's
I know.
that that
Right.
that's a lot. But I do
Yeah.
think I think just starting to recognize the ways in the ways that perhaps we are the prodigal son, might be a good thing to think about over the next couple weeks.
Yeah. No, I think that's for, our takeaways. I think that's a great takeaway. And just in the form of how you did it, the questions that we can ask ourselves. So, yes, today's reading was John's Gospel. And, there's two parts to it, but, the first part is where Jesus is going to pass into Jerusalem because it's Passover. He's a faithful Jew. Of course, he would go to, the holy city for the main temple. And in the scene, we see people are selling their wares in the temple, which is the holiest of holy places. And people have brought, live animals, their livestock, they've brought in items for sale. And this is totally contrary to, right, teachings of, Judaism. And my students or people always think that Jesus getting angry is him sinning.
Hmm.
So, in another version of the gospel and another gospel writers, he turns over the tables. But I've always stood it as righteous anger. Like, this is the most sacred place, and it is being taken advantage of. And so, yes, you should be angry. He should have been upset. I don't personally see that as sinful. Sin is separation from God, going against God's teachings. These are people who have done wrong and they know better, so to speak. So it's just always that invitation to think about, I don't know, in our lives, this is not an easy one, but righteous anger,
Hmm.
where when someone is wronged or something occurs, it is not okay to just sit back and just be like, that's cool. Or maybe they meant this. It's like, no, there's like a visceral reaction, a very, like a knowledge of what has been done. And of course, Jesus can correct because he is, teacher and Lord. So, that part's, but as a parent or a teacher or whatever role we're in authority, there are times where we have to step in and say, no, we've crossed the line. This is too far. This is not okay. And I think that that's an important part of what makes us all kind of thrive. I mean, the first reading is about the Ten Commandments. It's talking about,
Hmm.
in any good society, we are bound to certain rules with the idea that we thrive, we do better because we follow them. And when we don't, we see that people, their lives are broken, right? Relationships, don't, they're compromised and whatnot. So, we hold all of that, I guess, in our hearts and, in our reality.
It's interesting just as a parent hearing what you're sharing about, Jesus's justified anger, his righteous anger, I believe, are the words you used. And there's so many times, and there's memes and stories that you see online about this as well. But just as a parent, there are times where I, not so much now when the kids were younger, but I know every parent feels this, where you get really angry at something that your child has done. And oftentimes it's because you have asked them many, many times not to do something, or you've thought you made yourself very, very clear and they did something anyway. And I can relate to that righteous anger. I don't feel like I was unjust or sinning, quote unquote, in my anger at my children. So that's a really interesting perspective of I can understand that part of where Jesus is coming from, where he just wants to, where he's angry because
Yeah.
the rest of us are sinning. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting perspective that I've never thought of. But I know most parents, there's a kind of a funny meme going around that says, my children think I lost my mind, but if they would have listened to me the first 30 times, I wouldn't have had to. So I
Right.
get that, kind of bringing it down to the role of the mother.
Yes, yeah. Well, and anger, they always say, is a service, it's service mission for like disappointment and, or whatever, frustration, or it's the starting point in like, yeah, there are some places that ought to be sacred. Can we
Hmm.
just honor that?
Right.
I do feel that way oftentimes. And even honestly in like day-to-day life, can we recognize there's something holy or special or sacred? And
Right.
whether that's like how you treat an elderly person or just honestly during prayer, just being still for one moment.
Right.
It's those small things. And then the big thing is, yeah, a sacred space, like knowing that that's set apart and that's a special part of our society and our community.
Right. Right. And being respectful of all sacred spaces, even if it's not a place that's sacred to us in
Right.
particular.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
humility.
And I
So,
and I do love that, just the reminder of Jesus's humanity. That is where he is human as well, in his anger.
yeah.
He's which
Yeah.
is anger is such a human emotion.
Yeah.
So my takeaway this week, I'm going to think more about the prodigalness of my life. Again, I don't know if that's the correct
The
way, the
prodigality, the
prodigality of my life.
prodigality.
I'm going to spend some time every day looking at ways that I don't really think I'm reckless, but wasteful. And
Yeah,
whether that's food, whether that's time, whether it is, so it'll be, that's my takeaway. Is going to work on kind of just recognizing areas in my life where I could be more Christ-like.
I agree. And Jesus's second message is the sacredness of the body as a temple. And so I don't know. There's a lot. There's always there respecting our own selves, our bodies. It's just a fundamental exercise. So I know I didn't touch on that, but as a kid, you would always kind of joke about the body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, you're joking about it because there's, that is a
There's truth
teaching.
to it. Right. Right.
So yes, treat it respectfully.
Well, those are great things for us to take away as we move through the third week of Lent and fourth week of Lent. And when we circle back, it will be more than halfway through our Lenten time together. And as we wrap up this episode, I'm reminded what a gift it is to be invited to share our stories and our lessons and our journeys with others. Safe travels to you as you venture to Denver this week. And I look forward to reconnecting and continuing our Lenten conversation.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you for those reminders, but also thank you for the questions that you have raised in light of scripture and that image of a middle-aged dog, a new dog, an old dog, the tricks that we can learn and the fruit that they will bear. Can't wait to hear about that retreat. I look forward to seeing those videos at some point. We will keep you in our prayers, you and the community that you will be with. Have a great week.